everyone to Mama T's Kitchen. Today I'm going to teach you how to bake your own sourdough bread. The first ingredient that you'll need for sourdough bread is a sourdough starter. Sourdough is the oldest form of leavened bread, and it was discovered, there was some discovered back from Egyptian times, about 1500 BC. So it's a very old form of bread. You can purchase starters online. I bought mine from a website and they said it was from San Francisco. It's a San Francisco sourdough starter. They sent it to me. It was dried in a little packet. I added it to flour and water, and now I've had my starter for about 10 years. I did see the other day that on King Arthur's website, it's a King Arthur flour website, that they do sell little jars of starter for about $9. Now, if you're my Facebook friend in Las Vegas and live close by and would like a starter, you can always message me and I will get you a starter for your bread. You can make sourdough bread without using any additional yeast because there is a lot of yeast. That's what it is. It's yeast in the sourdough which makes your bread rise. But it takes a lot longer if you don't add yeast. It can take for the first rise around 4 hours. And then when you put it in the pans, it's probably another additional 4 to 6 hours. It depends on how warm your house is. And so anyway, I always add 2 teaspoons of yeast to my sourdough to speed up the process. So let's get going, and I will post the recipe for this sourdough bread on my Facebook page at Canning with Mama T. If you want to go in and you can print it that. I also put it on my video at the end of my video, but if you go to Facebook, you can print out the recipe. So let's get started, and thank you for visiting Mama T's Kitchen. When making sourdough bread, the first thing you need to do is to feed your starter. What I do is the night before I'm going to make bread, I feed the starter. This is my little jar that I keep my starter in the fridge, and so I've poured most of it in here. So we'll scrape that out, put everything in here. In a bigger bowl, you want it in a good sized bowl because the starter will grow. And if you don't have it in a big enough bowl, it could actually run over. I've got 1.5 cups of flour here. I'm going to pour it into here and add just over 1 cup of water and mix it up. So I'll set it here so you can kind of see. It's fairly thick, a little thicker than pancake mix maybe, or it's probably a good consistency. So now I'm going to cover it with saran wrap, and in the morning I will measure out 1.5 cups for my bread and then put the rest in this jar. I'll clean this jar up and put the remaining in here and then set this in the refrigerator. All night long and let it get all bubbly, and then we'll be ready to make our bread. So it's the next day, and my sourdough starter has been sitting overnight. This is how it looks like. It's almost doubled in bulk. And now I'm going to show you how to make the bread. So our recipe calls for 1.5 cups of fed sourdough starter. So that's what I have in my bowl here. So I'm going to fill up my little cup here with the fed sourdough starter. And then I'm going to add it to my mixer. Almost there. going to add 1/2 cup of warm water. This is just warm. Don't make it too hot, because if you make it too hot, it can kill your yeast. Then we're going to add 2 teaspoons of yeast. And a tablespoon of sugar. Now I'm going to turn this mixer on just a bit. Just mixed it up a bit, and I'm going to let it set for about 5 minutes until it's bubbly. And I'll show you how that looks when we come back with that. Now I think I'll go ahead and do the flour. One thing I've found in baking is you need to have a scale. And I have this little handy scale here. When you weigh flour, it's just so much better when you're baking, because if you have too much flour, any of your cookies or cakes or bread, it makes them tough and not good. So you want to have a scale. I bought this one on Amazon, and it does a great job. When I use it, I usually have it turned off, then I put the bowl on top and then turn it on, and then it zeroes out on the ounces. So in our recipe, it asks for 1 pound, 6 ounces of flour, which is 5 cups if you're not using a scale. No, 5 cups. So if you're using a cup, a measuring cup, remember to spoon in, or spoon in like the cup, the flour in the cup. Don't push the cup down into the flour and jam the flour in there, because you're going to have way too much flour. So right now I have 1 pound, 6 ounces of flour. There are 6 ounces of flour per cup. And right now I'm going to add the salt to the flour. I don't add it to my liquid mixture until it's all gone. I like to mix it in with the flour because I don't want it to affect the raising, or affect the yeast that's down here and the sugar that's growing. So I'm going to turn off our camera and be back in a few minutes. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes and the yeast has dissolved and it's kind of bubbling. You'll see it just kind of, how it's kind of bubbling just a bit. One thing I'm going to do is take this leftover sourdough starter and I'm going to put it back into my little jar, and then I'm going to store this in the refrigerator until the next time I make bread. Now your starter can live in the refrigerator without being fed for a week, maybe 2 at the longest. Don't leave it longer than that. And if you're not going to make bread every week like I do, you're going to want to feed it. And the way you do that is you take about a 1/2 cup out and throw the rest away, clean this out, put the 1/2 cup in, put a 1/2 cup of flour, 1/2 cup of water, stir it up, let it set out overnight. It's really important to let it just set and bubble. And then you put it back in the refrigerator. But I'll have instructions in the recipe for that. So that's how you kind of keep your starter going. You want to feed it. It is a living thing, so you got to feed it. All right. So now I'm going to add my flour to this mixer. And I'm going to mix this on low. Put my top on so it doesn't go crazy and blow flour everywhere. So I'm going to just turn it 1 notch. it is, see it's kneading, and I'm going to knead it for at least 5 minutes, and then we'll be done. Okay, so I'm kneading this bread, and I realize it doesn't quite have enough flour. So I'm going to add a little bit at a time. And the reason I know there's not enough flour in it is too sticky. And when there's just the right amount of flour, all the dough will pick up and go around in one ball by itself. So maybe I put too much water in it, so I'm going to let it, I put about, I'd say another half a cup of flour, and you'll see kind of holding together, picking up on the sides a bit. It's okay to be sticky, but you don't want it too sticky. So it looks like it's doing better. I'm going to stop it just for a minute, kind of scrape the sides a little, so I can get this that's on the sides to meet up with the other dough. Okay. All right, now let's turn it back on. That's better. Again, doing bread it takes experience, but that's why I'm doing this video, because I want to make sure you kind of see what we do. I'm going to add probably another 1/4 cup of flour. All right. Now that's looking better. The dough's going around. It's not sticking to the sides of the bowl anymore. It is a bit sticky, but it is all together. And that's what you want when you're kneading your dough. Now, if you don't have a mixer, I'm going to turn this off because it's kind of noisy. If you don't have a mixer, you can pour this dough out onto after you've mixed it up by hand, pour it out onto the countertop with flour and knead it by hand. And maybe I'll do that for a minute just to kind of show you how to knead. Okay, so I've kneaded this bread for about 5 minutes. And I'm going to show you how to knead bread by hand. I left it kind of sticky because I am going to add a little more flour to it, which will take away all that stickiness. So I don't want to put too much flour. So now I'm going to take this dough out, and I put on my little food gloves. It's nice because bread can be sticky. Get it all out of here. That's pretty cool. It comes out nice. You just have to kind of get your spatula in there and dig it out. All right, that's good. So now, when you're kneading bread, of course, put some on the counter, the flour on the counter. You want to make sure you've got flour. See, it's still kind of sticky. And when you're hand kneading, just take it and turn it over and squish down. Turn over, squish down, turn it and squish. Now, right now, it's like at a perfect consistency. It's not sticking on my gloves. You can pound on it, take your frustration out of it. And if you're going to hand knead, you do need to do this for at least 10 minutes until all the, it's like it's a very smooth, silky kind of filling to the bread. Just a teeny more down here so it doesn't stick. And so now it's looking good. So I would have just hand kneaded this. I've already kneaded it in my mixer for 5 minutes. I have a Bosch mixer, I love it. But you can use any kind of mixer with a bread hook. You always use your bread hook on it. And I've had KitchenAids. I always break my KitchenAids. I use them too much. It's my Bosch, I've had it for a long time. Just a little sticky, so I'm gonna rub just a little. Now it's time for the bread to raise. Do its first raise. You do 2 raise to let it rise. And to do that, I'm going to take this bowl and I'm going to spray some pan in it like this. And I'm going to take the bread, put it inside here, turn it upside down, and then turn it over so that the greasy part's on top. And then I'm going to put my lid on. Now, if you don't have a nice little bowl like this, you can just put some saran wrap over the top, or you can put a lightly moist kitchen towel over the top. And then we're going to let it sit for probably at least 90 minutes to 2 hours and let it raise, and then I'll be back and we'll shape our loaves. Okay, so it's been just over 2 hours. You can see my bread is nice and raised up here, ready to go into the pans. So the first thing I'm going to do is spray the pans with some Pam. You can use fish oil or butter or something to do this with. But you want to oil those really well so they don't stick. And then I'm going to take my little deal here, you can take a knife or whatever, and just cut my dough in half. Split it up as evenly as possible. Take it out and form a nice little loaf. Just a nice little loaf that's going to fit in there. I like to put a little flour on top of my sourdough bread. Looks pretty when it's baked with a little flour on top. So I'm put that in here. This one. Just kind of roll it into a loaf. Now you can form your dough, you can bake a few things different ways. I like to put mine in just bread pans because I love using my sourdough for sandwiches and things. But you can also put it in like a Dutch oven, the big Dutch oven things, and roll it into a big round ball, let it raise up in the Dutch oven and bake it in there. But this way I like to do it. So now I'm going to just cover this with saran wrap and let it raise up. I'll time it so I can give you an idea of how long it took to raise, because I know that's always one of the things when I was learning to bake bread. It's like, when is it time to bake it? And it was always something I sometimes would bake it too soon. But now I've kind of got it down. So we'll see you probably in about another hour and a half, I would imagine. So our bread has been raising for about an hour and it's almost ready to go. But what I'm going to do now is take the saran wrap off and let the tops of the dough dry out just a little bit. Sourdough bread seems to do better if you let the tops just dry just for probably about a half hour, and then we'll slice the tops and bake it. So it's been an hour and a half, so 90 minutes of raising. I left off the plastic covering about a half an hour ago, and the bread is looking good. Raised up nice. It might could go up just a little bit more, but if you let your bread raise up too much, it can actually implode. So this is a good raise on it. Now with sourdough bread and pretty much any bread, you need to kind of slice the top just a bit, especially your sourdough, and it kind of releases the gases because the bread when it gets hot, it starts growing more, and it can kind of, I don't know, it just kind of explodes a little bit. So if you take just a single edge razor blade or a really sharp knife and just kind of slice the tops just a little bit. And this is one thing, it makes it easier when you dry out the top. It kind of slices easier. So I'm just making some little slices there. And then we're going to put it into the oven. So I've placed the bread in the oven, and I'm going to turn the oven on to 400. And I'm going to time it for 20 minutes. And I've put it in a cold oven. I've found that, I don't know, with the sourdough bread too, it kind of likes going in a cold oven, and then it just warms up. So I'm going to cook it for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to come in, maybe turn the loaves around, and cook it for another 10 to 20 minutes. Okay, you can see the bread has puffed up a little more, and I just turned it, and I'm going to cook it for probably another good 10-15 minutes. Okay, we have hot, fresh, buttered sourdough bread straight out of the oven. I baked this, it took about 35 minutes at 400. I did turn it around. I rubbed a little butter on top to bring out the golden brown. And now I'm going to let it sit here for about 2 hours to completely cool. Then I'll slice it up, put it in a bag, and now we have sandwich bread for the rest of the week. But before that, I will probably cut off the heels of this one and have a piece of hot bread right now with my butter and pomegranate jelly. Wish you were here. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you try to make some bread. It's a great little talent to have. It takes some work. It's taken me a long time to figure out bread.